So I love this little story about a little boy, who is saying his prayers every night just the way his pastor taught him. Every night. And his name was Jimmy. And little Jimmy was just 5 years old. And he was very proud of the fact that he knew exactly what to say and how to say it while he was kind of kneeling down on his knees over the bed. And he knew exactly what to do without any coaching, and it made him feel really very, very good. But his parents were the parents, so they're still listening at the door, trying to make sure that little Jimmy does what he's supposed to do before saying his prayers before he goes to bed. And while listening at the bedroom door one day, they heard him add a couple of extra thoughts of his own. So, like, he finished his prayers all of the time, God bless mom, God bless dad, God bless grandma, and then he kind of hops into bed like lots of little children, at least if you're a Christian. But this particular night, he stayed on his knees a little bit while longer, and he looked up, kind of up at the ceiling, and he said with like real earnesty and real sincerity, he says, "Please take care of yourself, God, because if anything happens to you, we're all sunk." And I just love that story. I love it because it reminds me that young children tend to have less barriers. They don't put up as many guards the way so many of us do. They're still innocent and haven't had that kind of tainted moment of seeing all of the harshness or whatever it might be, where there's more static in the middle of that conversation. And I just find it kind of amazing, and I think a lot of us envy that wholesome kind of open channel, that sense of connection. And while many of us feel like we are more mature and we have a better understanding of the world, and we often find ourselves blinded by all of the things we have to do and the places where we have to be, this week's Torah portion kind of tells us, wait a second, let's focus again. Let's see what the possibilities are, because in this parsha, it's called Vayetze, and it's rich with meaning of this incredible event, one particular event, and all of these levels of interpretation that come over centuries and centuries and centuries. It describes Jacob's flight from when he's discovered that he stole his father Isaac's blessing from his twin brother Esau. And Esau is so enraged that he's threatening to kill Jacob out of this trickery. And at a certain point, Jacob runs away, and he pauses for the night, and it's sunset, and it's in a town called Luz, and there's really nothing there. Later on, this same spot is going to be called Beit El, a house of God. And he takes a stone, and he uses it for a pillow, and he closes his eyes, and he falls asleep, and he dreams. And in the Torah, certainly in the earlier parts of the Bible, God really appears when folks are dreaming. And in his dream, Jacob sees this ladder, a ladder that connects heaven and earth, and angels are going up and down. Now, God addresses this young Jacob directly and says, "I am the God of your grandfather Abraham, the God of your father Isaac, and I'm going to make you a promise. And the promise is that you're going to have this land just like I promised them, that it's going to be for you and your descendants, and they're going to be numerous as dust of the earth." It didn't quite work out that way. And that God is going to be this personal protector of Jacob. Now, the dream is kind of captured in literary and artistic history for, again, maybe 30 centuries or so. Folks really think about this idea of Jacob's ladder. And in the gematria is this funny thing that some of us do in the Jewish community. Every Hebrew letter has a numerical equivalent, right? Aleph is a 1, Bet is a 2, Gimel is a 3, so on and so forth. So if every letter has a number, the word for ladder, which is a sulam, it comes out to 130. Again, just adding up all of the different letters. Sulam, ladder, has the same numerical equivalent as another word, Sinai. Sinai is where Moses receives the Torah. It's the place where it's revealed, right? Revelation. Both places, the Sulam and Sinai, is where a human being came close to meeting God. Sulam at the ladder, and Sinai, the mountain. So when Jacob wakes up from this dream, he's kind of astonished, and he's grasping with this idea that he's in the presence of God, and he says he doesn't realize it. Shaken. He's really shaken up about it. He says, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. And that ladder is the gateway to heaven. Some say stairway to heaven. But Jacob's ladder, you didn't know that? Come on. Jacob's ladder is important because it's Jacob's ladder is one which every single person can climb. It's not just for the angels. It captures the imagination through the centuries because you and I can, if we choose, find it and climb it ourselves. And if you climb that ladder, there's this potential of having an encounter with the divine. Now, I know the word God brings up lots of kind of challenges for some of us. We don't really know what God is, or maybe there's a certain idea of God that our community or society gives to us, and it doesn't really work for us. Fine, choose another word. Talk about the divine. Talk about the Kadosh Baruch Hu, a holy one, a source, the eternal, whatever you want. It doesn't have to be loaded with other people's baggage on our shoulders. We can still have that encounter and potentially hear words of promise and protection and inspiration, because I think something that we are yearning for more than ever is to be inspired and to be held and to be known. And don't forget where Jacob came from. He fled his home. Everything around him is broken. He becomes a survivor himself. No longer connected to his family until much later on in the text, he has to run away. And in the middle of nowhere, he has this wonderful epiphany and says, this is the house of God. This is Beit El. A place that's desolate and empty is now filled with potential, and the potential for him to see who he can be too. And when he encounters that Sulam, there's something that's really extraordinary that happens. He has a moment of having a strong faith, and he has a moment where he can see a future that's going to be full and has potential. A little bit later, he's going to doubt it again, but for this one moment when he lets his guard down and he's permitting himself to be vulnerable, he sees his future not just as Jacob, but as Israel, that we are still connected to. We are the people of Israel. So again, what he read was, God was in this place and I didn't know it. That's what Jacob said. God was in this place and I didn't know it. Think about that again for a second. What a tremendous statement, that God is in every place we go, and we don't always realize it. Sometimes I teach a class for folks with young children. It's like a Jewish parenting thing, talking about Jewish values. And part of the class, I'll talk about how do you find God while you're doing the laundry? And the folks in the class will be like, come on, no. Like, you've gone too far. How can we have an encounter that's real and authentic? Wherever we might be, it doesn't have to be only in the synagogue, and it doesn't only have to be when we're looking off the highest mountain. What about in our normal, our everyday? Do we have a chance to have an encounter with that ladder, with that sulam? Can we have a sense of feeling God's presence deeply, so deeply that we come away with broader vision and a stronger energy and clearer insights, an enlarged perspective, and maybe feeling a little bit more grounded on this world? Now, I know what a lot of you will say. God, encounter with God. Only few are able to do that. And I'm going to say, I don't really believe it. I'm no mystic. And I don't meditate. And I'm not doing 14ers for sure. And trying to have this experience of God's presence I'm kind of a regular guy. And I have a roll up your sleeves kind of a theology. And I believe God's presence is wherever we're willing to find it, whether we're connecting with one another or in a moment of prayer or doing an act of justice. There's more than one door. My hope is we get to open doors. So that other handout that we put in that little pamphlet, for some of us who are part of the congregation, you've seen this once or twice. We're sharing it around. This is a new vision statement for our congregation. It's been a long time to say who we are and where we're going and sort of take our DNA after the last more than 50 years and try and figure out now what's going to direct us. If you look at that second one, it says that we are a spiritual center. This is our vision. This is who we aspire to be. Are we there yet? No, not quite. We're working on it. But what does it say? Joyful song, vibrant discussion, quiet reflection. Here, ancient traditions are revitalized and reaffirmed. We seek a connection to the holy. There's a great debate whether that should be a capital H or a lowercase h. So you pick. It's up to you. We seek a connection to the holy, however we imagine that. So joyful song, we understand that. We know what that means. Music moves us so much more often than words. Vibrant discussion, come to Torah study. Check out our Pirkei Avot once a month lunch and learn, a section from the Mishnah, and hear how people take ancient sources and figure out how do we live with it today, 21st century Judaism. How do we grow from it? How do I be a better parent to my 40-year-old, be a parent to my 10-year-old or 13-year-old? How do I grow? That's the vibrant discussion. How do we deal with what's going on in the world? We can't just find sanctuary in our sanctuary. We have to be renewed here and go back out there. What's the conversations that need to happen with our teens? Of who are they growing to be and what does Jewish values say about how we stand in the world? Quiet reflection, sometimes we're not so good at that. But after this tragedy in Pittsburgh, how many people just came into our sanctuary just to sit? Before services, after services, during the week, how do we just come together or just have some quiet myself? How can I have the quiet in this space when I complete my conversion or after a loss? What do I do to find the quiet and rest? And then it says ancient traditions that are revitalized and reaffirmed. We were having a conversation in an introduction to Judaism class here about conversion, it happened to be. And part of conversion is you go into this ritual bath. It's called a mikvah. So we were explaining what it was and how people use it. And there's lots of traditions for the mikvah, but one of the things in terms of revitalizing and reaffirming commitment to ritual is most people know about the mikvah for conversion, if you want to choose to become Jewish, or these traditional laws of family purity where women would go at the end of their cycles, and in order to be intimate with husbands again, they had to go to this mikvah. Some of us have some challenges with some of that symbolic language, and I get that, but it's a different conversation. How can we take this renewal water, life-giving water, if you immerse and you're surrounded by water with no other barriers, you have no choice but to be in the fetal position. And then you stand up again. And when you stand up again, it is sort of like being born again. Now, we don't always talk about being born again because our neighbors use that a lot, but new beginnings, new opportunities. How many folks, and I've shared this with some of you before, how many times have we used mikvah after healing from wounds, whether it's cancer or assault? How do we go to a mikvah before Shabbat or Yom Kippur or a wedding? Maybe we use these renewing, life-giving waters, thinking of being surrounded in a fetal position by water and standing up again to begin again. The two most moving times for me of mikvah is helping somebody who lost his wife, who's still kind of young, take off his wedding ring and begin again and try and find love again and start a family when he was closer to 50. How do we mark that ritually? What about the soldier who comes back after a really difficult deployment in Afghanistan? How do you come back to my house and go to the mikvah in uniform and come out in your civilian clothes? There are rituals that are supposed to help us with transformation. We're not supposed to do them because we're told to. Like for some, that's enough. That's not enough for me. I know that's not enough for most of you. How do we revitalize and reaffirm spirituality, tradition, ritual on our terms? So to close it, the Torah says, how awesome is this place? Mano Rama Komazeh. How awesome is this place? It could be none other than the very dwelling place of God, Beit El. What happened to Jacob can happen to anybody, anytime, any place. I think we can have those moments if we are willing to let it happen. Now, I know most of us don't have epiphanies like Jacob did. Some for sure do. What does it feel like? For me, that moment feels like comfort and focus and being grounded and knowing that I'm not alone ever, ever. That I'm not alone ever. And if we can have some encounter like that, then things will never be the same again.